We will kill bin Laden. We will crush Al-Qaeda. That has to be our biggest national security problem.
Tonight, I can report to the American people and to the world that the United States has conducted an operation that killed Osama bin Laden, the leader of Al-Qaeda.
I will promise you this, that if we have not gotten our troops out by the time I am president, it is the first thing I will do. I will get our troops home. We will bring an end to this war.
Last year, I announced the end to our combat mission in Iraq. To date, we've removed more than 100,000 troops.
I will close Guantanamo. I will restore habeas corpus.
More than 200 FBI agents have reported abusive treatment of Guantanamo prisoners. As of September 2008, 7 military prosecutors have either resigned or requested reassignment because they viewed Guantanamo's military commissions as unfair. 6 prisoner suicides were reported, with the youngest being a 21-year-old who had been in custody since he was 16. The US government spent $12 million in Guantanamo military commissions in 2011. In 2009, President Obama issued an executive order that called for the Guantanamo Bay detention facility to be closed within a year. A month later, in his first State of the Union address, the president told Americans that he ordered the closure of the controversial camp in Cuba and will seek swift and certain justice for the captured terrorists. Guantanamo, which remains open, has not been mentioned in the president's annual speech since. The proposed road to closure has been arduous and slow. In December 2009, Obama signed a presidential memorandum ordering Attorney General Eric Holder and Defense Secretary Robert Gates to acquire an Illinois state prison which would serve as a replacement for Guantanamo. In May 2010, Congress blocked funding for the prison there and all further replacement detention facilities in the US. For most of Obama's time in office, Congress has made closing the prison difficult through various pieces of legislation, including bans on sending prisoners to particular countries and through requirements for the government to meet in order to transfer detainees from the prison. As a result, the prison stayed open. The progress towards the closure ground to a halt. By June 2010, the push to shutter the detention camp began to lose steam. Political opposition and competing national priorities, the New York Times wrote that it made it unlikely the president would fulfill his promise before the end of 2013. The events of September 11, 2001 and the United States' reaction to them has changed the course of history. On that day, Islamic extremists dealt with the United States with a crushing blow. More than 2,750 people were killed in New York City, including some 500 foreign nationals from 91 countries. But the damage to the United States would pale in comparison to the damage the Bush administration wreaked. This view was generated because it was seen that Bush exploited the post-9/11 climate of the fear and uncertainty. In the days after the occurrence, the government arrested and detained 1,200 men in the United States, most of whom were either Muslims or of Middle Eastern or South Asian background. Another 8,000 was sought for interrogation. Russ Feingold warned, "This is a dark hour for civil rights in America." The prison would become known as USA's black site. Innocent prisoners have no means of appeal. On the advice of White House legal counsel Alberto Gonzales, Bush declared that the Geneva Convention on the Treatment of Prisoners of War, which the United States ratified in 1955, did not apply to suspected Taliban and Al-Qaeda members. The CIA was instructed to employ 10 enhanced interrogation methods, the product of 5 decades of research into psychological torture. Such psychological torture had been abandoned at the end of the Cold War and repudiated in 1994 when the United States signed the UN Convention Against Torture. Back in force after 9/11, it was criticized as going beyond the strictly psychological. Arthur Schlesinger declared that he considered the new torture policy the most dramatic, sustained, and radical challenge to the rule of law in American history. The CIA outlined its procedure. Upon arrest, the suspect would be deprived of sight and sound with blindfolds and earmuffs. If the detainee proved uncooperative, he would be stripped naked, flooded with constant bright light and high volume noise up to 79 decibels, and kept awake for up to 180 hours. Once the prisoner was convicted that he had no control, serious interrogation would begin. Subsequent methods included dousing the prisoner with water, denying the use of toilet facilities, chaining them to ceilings, and required them to stand or kneel in painful positions for prolonged periods of time. The International Committee of the Red Cross reported that the prisoners at Guantanamo were told that they were being taken on the verge of death and back. As seen from Abu Zubaydah's description of his experience with waterboarding, unless you have been strapped down to the board, have endured the agonizing feeling of water overpowering a gag reflex, and then feel your throat open and allow pint after pint of water to involuntarily fill your lungs, you will not know the meaning of the word. Waterboarding is a controlled drowning. Similarly seen with the most recent case of Shakir Amer, the last British detainee cleared for release in 2007 but still held. In 2001, he was detained in Afghanistan. He was handed back to the US military for money. Never being charged or stood trial, Amer has been detained at Guantanamo for 13 years. The US fears Britain will let Shakir Amer return to the battlefield if he is freed from Guantanamo Bay to live in London. A recent US Defense Department briefing note reveals Mr. Amer is not being punished for past criminal activities, but is being detained to prevent his return to the battlefield. In an exclusive interview in his office overlooking the White House, Mr. Sloan said he knew the reasons behind each prisoner's continued detention. He could not discuss Mr. Amer's case directly, but said, "In general, there are issues that need to be addressed, discussions with other governments, but frankly, I do not think any of those are adequate explanations or justifications. I think there is not a sound justification for delaying those approved for transfer." On December 19, 2014, the Senate passed the National Defense Authorization Act, which contained a provision making it easier for the government to transfer detainees to foreign countries. Before detainee transfers could take place under the old law, the Defense Secretary had to make detailed certifications about security and other issues in the host country to assure Congress that released detainees would not engage in terrorist activities in their new country. Congress eased many of these restrictions. He said the transfers had long been in the works, but the government was finally able to put a place to move the prisoners. Overall, there are now 155 detainees held at the Guantanamo Bay, with 77 approved for transfer. Making it clear the Obama administration still holds closing the prison as a priority, President Obama recommitted to his promise during his January State of the Union address. Overall, it seems like Obama is making small but tangible progress on keeping his promise. However, a significant amount of work remains, and there are many restrictions on transfers still registered. Thus, it appears that instead of Obama breaking his promise, it is merely stalled, with Obama's decisions appear to have changed the shape of the war on the closure of Guantanamo Bay and the war on terror.